Are you looking for an inexpensive Samsung Galaxy A series smartphone in 2025? A smartphone that won't break the bank in 2025. This was one of Samsung's best selling smartphones of all time, the Samsung Galaxy A15 5G. With a beautiful 1080p 90 hertz OLED display. Again, this display is nice for $150. Now, this is one of Samsung's best-selling smartphones of 2024, and I believe it's one of the best-selling smartphones for Samsung of all time, coming in with a decent 6.5-inch OLED display, 1080p, and, really not that bad. Okay. Now, there are going to be some things that people like about these Samsung smartphones due to the cheap price tag of the devices. A lot of them coming in at almost free if you open up a new account, port in your phone number, things like that. That's what makes these phones such great deals because they're even beating some of the iPhones when it comes to sales. But what is so good about this phone, especially in 2025, you can get this phone for like $75 at Walmart. You can get it at, carriers online for pretty much free by porting in your phone number. It does have a 50 megapixel main camera, 5 megapixel ultra wide, and a 2 megapixel depth camera, okay, micro camera. Which I always think micro cameras are kind of limited anyway on what they can really do. Now, there are going to be some things that I don't like about the phone. The fact there is no 4K video recording. You would think they would bring down 4K 30 on this. This really is not much of a. This phone is really not that much different from the new A16 that we did a full review on. Go check that out at Mr. Positive Live on YouTube, and please subscribe today. Click on that bell icon. Again, overall, the best thing about this phone is the price tag plus the OLED display. There are some things it's lacking, like IP54 water and dust resistance, which they put on the A16, but that's okay. The good thing is, it does come with a headphone jack, Type-C charging. Again, you do have two sound microphones, decent sounding microphones, I should say, built-in fingerprint scanner / power button, and your up and down volume rockers. Now, on the A16, they did do away with the the headphone jack. They did do away with the headphone jack, so now you have to use Bluetooth and stuff like that. What are you getting with this phone? Now, the phone was originally released on December 11th, 2023, so it's been out almost well over 2 years now. You are getting a basically 800 nits of brightness, so that's pretty good for all day brightness. You will have some glare, but overall, that's bright enough. You can see outdoors as well. It's a 90 hertz, 800 nits, Super AMOLED display. So whatever one tells you on these spec sheets, oh, don't buy the A series of smartphones because they're not good. Now, this does come with an Exynos chipset. It's a MediaTek Dimensity 1600 chipset. That's not a terrible chipset. It's a 6 millimeter chipset. It's decent for what you're getting. You're getting a 2.2 gigahertz Cortex A76, and that's decent. It's a Mali G57, so you can do most moderate gaming with it. It's not going to have the best Geekbench numbers or graphically intense numbers like higher end S25s or S24 Ultras or even iPhones. Okay, you're getting a minimum display. You're getting the same cameras on this phone as this year's smartphone, so not much has changed in that package. You're getting a 6.5-inch display versus a 6.7-inch display, which is on the A16. I believe this phone here has better pixel count than the A16, so you will get that due to the smaller screen. And I believe that the battery life on this phone this year is actually better than the A16. For some reason, I've noticed with the A16 that the battery life is 5,000 mAh battery, but it's not as good. And I think that's due to the chipset they put into it, which is the Exynos 1300 chipset. Not that that's a bad chipset, but I don't think it's as good as the MediaTek chipset for battery life. That's where the MediaTek chipsets, I think, are slightly better in the device. You're getting Wi-Fi 802, you're getting Bluetooth 5.3, which is the latest. You're also getting NFC on board, no FM radio, USB Type-C, it's 2.0, not 3.0. You're getting a 5,000 mAh battery, 25-watt wired charging, no wireless charging. So if you're expecting to use a wireless charging brick, I don't even use a wireless charging pad. This does not have that. The N22 benchmarks were 30,674. The 3D benches were 335, so barely better, really barely better than the A16. The A16 and this were kind of head-to-head. Similar in specs overall. The display has 786 nits max brightness, so we'll round that to 800 nits. Loudspeaker is decent, but it is mono sounding. The A16, on the other hand, does give you stereo speakers, which is nice. There is a version of this that is 128 gigs and 4 gigabytes of RAM. The version we got here is 128 and 8 gigs of RAM, so that's good. There's also, if you do have the 4 gig model, it is still 128. That runs you for $129.11 on Amazon.com US. If you're buying it on the UK site, it's around $163. And if you're buying it through other sites, it's probably going to be a little bit more. Okay. Overall, the phone is really, really fast. It does have a 90 hertz refresh rate. I really didn't see, I mean, there's going to be some, glitching here and there, but it is 90 hertz. If you do bring down the refresh rate from 90 hertz refresh rate down to 60 hertz refresh rate, you will get better battery life. Okay. Now, the version we have here is AT&T. And the AT&T version does have 128 gigs of storage, okay? And 8 gigabytes of RAM, okay? Now, the thing is, you will get a lot of bloatware on the Metro version, Metro by T-Mobile version, the T-Mobile version, which are the same thing. AT&T, just too much bloatware. So you're going to want to uninstall the bloatware because One UI will run much better with that uninstalled. The good news is you will get 4 years of updates because it's already been out almost 2 years. You'll get 4 more years of updates, security patches, and stuff like that. It is running the latest One UI software from Samsung, so it is running pretty good. And you're getting plenty of updates. You do have NFC, you do have your sound, you do have power saving, locations, you name it. The cameras aren't much to talk about. It's the same thing as this year. It's not much different, really. You do get your photo, video modes. You do get other stuff like night modes, micro, slow motion, food, panorama, photos, and hyperlapse. Okay? You do get plenty of stuff, plenty of options. It is just like using an S-series smartphone. You're just not going to get all the bells and whistles of Galaxy AI on board and stuff like that. Now, what I would like to see happen with the next series, maybe the A17, is maybe get rid of the, I'm tired of seeing this notch. They've had it in the last 5 years, 6 years, I think it is. They've had that same damn notch. Samsung, get rid of that notch. It's annoying. The bezels don't necessarily need to be smaller, but get rid of the notch. Just go to a punch hole selfie camera. It just makes sense. I'd also like to see these designs change in the back. They're making these phones too much like the S-Series. If you look at this right now, it looks like an S25. I could fool anybody and say this is an S25 right now. Because the S25 does have a blue color like this as well. Okay? The other thing is the fingerprint scanner on here is pretty bad. It's not that fast. It will glitch occasionally. So as you can see, it's not the quickest. It's actually a little bit delayed. So that's one thing as well. Let me get into the positives of the smartphone before we go. 6.5 inch OLED display, 800 nits of brightness, decent. The display is the best thing about this phone. It's got a really solid display. The overall, the overall package, the phone runs just fine. It's not the snappiest smartphone we've ever used, but for 90 hertz, it's better than 60 hertz, okay? You're really not going to notice much of a difference. You will have to get off some of the bloatware because there's tons of it. You will need to disable some of the apps. We did a review about a year ago on the A14, and that thing was so slow. These two phones run the same processor, okay? There's also an A15 4G, and that one's junk. Stay away from that. Upgrade to this one, it's much better. Okay. Samsung has too many A-series smartphones. I have to say this because, I mean, there are a good series of phones, but they have the A06, A05, A04s, all kinds of them. And there's really no need for that many A-series smartphones. And like an A04G, I think it's an A15 4G LTE model. Like, why? It's the same phone. Okay. There's no sense. The only thing is it's a different chipset because it's not a 5G phone. Okay. It's like a Snapdragon 600 series. This phone is okay. It's fast enough. It does come with 8 gigs of virtual RAM. If you have the 4 gigabyte model, you can turn on the virtual RAM, and that will kind of slow the phone down a little bit, though. Just take that in precaution, and it may even affect the battery life a little bit. So, overall, decent display. It is 1080p. It is 800 nits of brightness, so it is perfectly viewed outside. You will have some glare. There is, I believe, Gorilla Glass 3 on board. I could be wrong. Yeah, Gorilla Glass 3. The body ratio is 84.3% screen to body ratio. And overall, it's decent. You can get a 64 gig model, the 128 gig model. Stay away from the 64 gig model. There's also a 256 gig model with 8 gigabytes of RAM. Our model is 128 with 128 with 8 gigs of RAM on board. And we can also upgrade that with virtual RAM to make it a little bit quicker. But you may slow the phone down a little bit. You may see that. Again, Wi-Fi 802. 5.3 Bluetooth. You get the picture. 5,000 milliamp hour battery. 25 watt wired charging. The other negative is you do not get the charger in the box. I'm going to keep saying it, Samsung, until you put a charger in the box. You just get these two things and some booklets. That's it. The phone overall does get a pass. It is doable. If you're looking for a budget smartphone, this is probably this will probably be the budget smartphone king for 2025, to be honest with you. If you have this phone, should you upgrade to the A16? No, because the Geekbench numbers aren't really telling the whole story. Honestly, this one here gives you better battery life. I'm being 100% honest. The chipset from the MediaTek Dimensity chipset, and a lot of people will dog this and trash this they'll trash this processor. It is a 5G processor. It has much better battery life than the Snapdragon ones. And they can tell you all they want. This battery will last you 2 days, 5,000 mAh battery easily. The A16 has some of the worst battery life I've seen in a Samsung smartphone in a long time, okay? I had to charge it after 4.5 hours. I don't know if it's my unit, but it has pretty bad battery life. I have it on 60 hertz because 90 hertz was just eating the battery up. Actually, we did test a friend of mine's A16, and he had the same issue. So it isn't just my unit. The A16 just isn't that as good as this on battery, okay? If you do want a good phone with good battery life, check out last year's Moto G 2024 5G. That's probably one of the best battery machines you can get into 2025, okay? Overall, this phone does have a good package, though. You are getting decent sound with the mono speakers. You are getting a decent AMOLED display. I will give them that. Overall, the picture quality is clear. The cameras are still pretty solid on here because they're using this camera setup on the newer one. So it ain't much of a difference there. Another downfall, no 4K video recording. I would like to at least seen that, even on this version of a phone. Even though it's 2024, they could have added this to this phone very easily. That's the downfall with some of these A-series smartphones. You do get really good picture quality. You can do HDR, but it's really low. There is no gimbal type setup, so you're going to have a lot of shakiness in the videos, and the photo quality is fuzzy at times. So it is understood. You're getting a solid phone here. If you're looking for a budget smartphone, this does get a pass. You can get it for right around $70 right now at Walmart and some carriers for free. Thanks for watching Positive Talk Daily. Get yourself an A15 5G in 2025.